Well, you're out in sticks. It's behind time, yeah. The pinch baits that behind time.
Really well consulted on this, because we need to get this right. It's a wonderful opportunity. Congratulations to the team for the town swim tonight. This is another example of being able to pull in funding.
Okay, thank you. That's a lot.
Hi, Billy.
Okay, now we're live on YouTube and we've got the presentation. Hopefully everybody can see that.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Skegness Town Council meeting, 7 p.m. on Wednesday, the 3rd of March. Agenda item number 1, Police Crime Commissioner for Lincolnshire, Mark Jones, is here to for this presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Chairman, and good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for having me here this evening. It's always a pleasure to come back to the east of the county, although it's virtual this time. Last time it was in physical form. So hopefully, once again, we should see very soon people being able to come to the east safely and respectfully to the local populace to enjoy what the East Coast has got to offer. So I look forward to working with you all to make that happen. And by way of reassurance, I would just say that I'm in regular contact with the leader of the district council on the east to make sure that all the messaging and all the preparedness ready for the easing of restrictions is being done as smoothly as possible. And as late as today, we've had many conversations, and I know that's happening with the Chief Constable and Chief Superintendent Paul Timmings, who's in charge of the Lincoln Resilience Forum as well, to make sure that the East Coast residents are respected and kept safe as we see those transitions. If I sort of launch straight into the presentation, the front page is obviously just by way of introduction. So if we can move to the next one, please. Just a refresher, really, you've got this being recorded, so you can look at these slides at your leisure, so I'll not dwell on them too much, but just to really be clear what the role of the Police and Crime Commissioner is, and that it absolutely is not the policing's representative to you or to the community. It's very much the case that I am your representative to policing, and that's a really important distinction, and that we're there to make sure that the forces run efficiently, effectively, and delivers for all corners of the county a police service that we can be proud of. And in addition to that, there are a number of other roles, not least of which commissioning services for victims of crime and working ever more frequently with our wider criminal justice system to try and make sure that that works, but also that we reduce reoffending. So there's a large amount of contact with prisons, probation, prosecution, etc., to make sure that that system is working for us all. Next slide, please. I'll not go through these, as I say, you've got this, but this just gives you an idea of some of the areas in which I spend my time operating. So the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners being the first categories. So there are some national roles and responsibilities that I undertake as the national lead for PCCs for serious and organised crime, specialist capabilities, overall policing performance. And that's really to make sure that Lincolnshire's voice is heard on that national stage and that we're helping shape some of these national policies and discussions. And we get very much involved in some of the debates around what kind of legislation would be helpful. So at the moment, we are seeing the domestic abuse bill come to fruition, and police and crime commissioners have very much been involved in supporting that and making sure that it will work in reality on the ground for enforcement by the police, but also to protect vulnerable victims of crime. So there's a whole raft of things there that go across from the national, the regional to the local. But as I say, I won't go through them in any detail. They are there, and you can look at those at your leisure. And if there's any questions you would have after tonight, I will of course come back to you with any answers if required. Next slide, please. So the Police and Crime Plan is a document that all PCCs are required by law to create, and the Police and Crime Plan for Lincolnshire runs up until 2021. It normally runs up until a year past the PCC election, but as we know, that was cancelled last year, and it will happen this year. So there will be a review of the Police and Crime Plan, and all of our partners around the county will get to influence that plan and be part of the consultation, yourselves included, to make sure that whatever is put forward as the proposals for the future strategic direction for policing and community safety, that you will have that input. So at the moment, the plan splits into these 4 categories, and that makes it simple for everybody to understand which part we're working to. So tonight would be listening, responsive and accountable, because I'm being accountable to yourselves and I'm listening to your views and concerns. But equally on a different day, it might be that we're dealing with policing that works, where we're talking about whether they've got the right support financially to provide the right equipment, whether strategically we're heading in the right direction with policing, community safety and prevention in partnership. Well, there's a whole raft of things we do there to support the wider community. So domestic abuse as an example, a lot of those services are commissioned by the county council, and I work in partnership with them to make sure that they're effective, efficient. I also contribute financially towards them to make sure that our victims of crime are getting supported. And then protecting, supporting victims and vulnerable speaks for itself. I get £868,000 currently from the Ministry of Justice with which to commission victim services, and I'll be frank, it's not enough. We actually spend around £1.1 million on victims of crime services in Lincolnshire, and throughout the year we get opportunities to bid for additional funding. So this year we've been fortunate enough to bring in additional funding as a result of the COVID situation, and we've been successful in bringing money in to support those kind of crimes where we believe that they are harder to detect. So things like domestic abuse, again, sexual violence, things like that, where there is a greater need for support, we've been able to bring money in to help that. Next slide, please. So this is a new part of the work that we're doing. I mean, one of the things that's continually been a question from communities has been about how they engage, not just with the OPCC, but with the force and with other partners. So whether that's health, mental health, whether it's local government at different levels. And there's a real gap there. And it was clear that we needed to bring that together. We all spend public money trying to support our community, prevent them falling foul of criminals, but also support them in lots of other different ways. And what we wanted to do was create a role that was there to support the community, was there to listen to the community, and actually also to raise concerns, whether they're about policing matters, whether they're about other community issues. But equally, they can come back with support and ideas. And it could be that there are, for example, bidding rounds that we are made aware of, that we can then support different elements of the community to bid for funding and make sure that we're maximising what we spend in Lincolnshire for the benefit of residents, and make sure we're bringing in as much money into the county as possible. Now, your representative is in the meeting tonight, Rasheen. She started in my office some years ago, actually, as an intern, and was superb. And then at the end of her internship, she went out and has been working over in your area in the third sector, and has now come back as the Safe Together team member for your part of the county. So she will be in touch with you to discuss in more detail her work, what she can do, and obviously to support your work in helping the local community. Next slide, please. So this slide and the next slide really are demonstrations of some of the things we've invested in. It isn't until you're looking back, and I know it's sort of been an extra year really, you start to look back and think how far we've come. So every police officer, special and PCSO has body-worn video to protect them and the public. We've now got a fleet of 4x4s. We've got 24/7 drone coverage. We've got all-terrain vehicles across the county, and we've just invested in a brand new vehicle that has been selected specifically to operate in the East Coast along the beach. So it is not the same as the one you see in the picture. It's built to a different specification entirely to make sure that it is able to support all the different tasks it needs to do along the East Coast. Next slide, please. And again, further investments, a new fleet of firearms vehicles, and the difference between the BMW X5s you see and the old Volvo estates that have been phased out. For a start, they're quicker, they can get to places faster, which in a firearm situation you'll appreciate is vital. They carry more weight, so the amount of kit that these officers carry is tremendous, and can obviously slow the vehicle and make it more difficult to handle. It also means, because of the extra height, they can actually deploy straight from their seat, ready to go. So before, they were having to go to the back seat, take the kit out of the locked boxes, etc., and then deploy, losing valuable seconds and minutes. So that's been a huge step up. In addition, we've invested in a number of the electric vehicles. And we know very well that we're going to have to move to an electric fleet. We're not at the point where electric response vehicles are a thing in the force, but we do have an amount of marked and unmarked electric vehicles which are used by CID, for example, or people doing neighbourhood work. So they're not designed to do blue light runs at this stage, but we are very much looking to the future and saying, well, how do we make the force more sustainable? We've got LED lighting throughout our entire estate now. We've got solar panels across the buildings. There's a large investment being put into that, but it's obviously making us more efficient at the same time. The fingerprint scanners are something that we were amongst the top 5 forces in the country to roll out. They enable officers at the side of the road to verify people's identity. And as you can imagine, with the size of Lincolnshire, it's a huge issue if you're 20 miles away from the nearest custody suite. If you can avoid arresting somebody and driving them all the way back just to check who they are, that's a huge advantage. And again, it's freeing up officer time so they can be out in our community for as long as possible. Next slide, please. One of the issues that I am yet to speak anywhere and there not be some concern around is about issues on our roads. And there's a number of different things with roads. Firstly, the amount of human tragedy that we see on our roads through people who die and are seriously injured. And we are seeing that those numbers are still very prevalent in Lincolnshire in greater numbers than most parts of the country. And in part, that's not surprising because we have 5,500 miles of road that are mainly B and C category. But equally, we've seen the COVID effect where, because the roads have been emptier, it means people can drive faster. And equally, some people are very much out of practice at the moment with driving. They've been off the road significantly, and that can have an effect. So we do want to drive down the number of people that meet with tragedy on our roads. And in particular, the East Coast is one of those places that attracts people into Lincolnshire that maybe don't know our roads as well. And so we want to make sure that people that are visiting the county get here safely, are respectful while they're here, and then leave safely. In particular, the focus on the force has been on making sure that some of those key elements that cause issues are recorded. And this is a snapshot of a much larger report that covers a vast array of different crime types that we've designed to help the force providers with assurance around what they're doing. So you can see there, it gives you a snapshot of the kind of thing that's going on. How many people are stopped for speeding, seatbelts, mobile phone, drink and drug driving. The one that stands out for me actually is vehicles seized. There's a huge number, and mainly that's no license, no insurance, or people that have committed a serious enough crime that their vehicle is being taken away there and then. And if you look at that, 200 per month, well, if it takes about 20 minutes to do a stop, check identity, fill out the paperwork, it then will take 30 to 40 minutes for a tow truck to arrive. That's an hour, 200 hours of police officer time every month tied up with dealing with these things. So we're working really hard to try and work out how we can free up police officer time there as well. Because again, if we're tying 200 hours of police officer time up there, they're not able to respond to other things. So we're doing a number of things to do that at the moment. And we're confident that with the use of technology, we will be able to come up with some additional solutions, which means we'll have fewer people on the roads that are uninsured, for example, which will be a huge step forward. Next slide, please. So this gives you some specific detail around crime that's recorded in the Skegness area. And as you'll see, in the last 12 months, there have been significant reductions. And I'm no fool. I know full well that in large part, that's down to the changes we've had because you haven't been having the visitors. COVID has meant people are at home more. Therefore, we haven't got a nighttime economy to worry about. It means it's, generally speaking, harder to burgle people's homes if they're not going out. There's all sorts of things in there that are factors. And there are a couple of things that are particularly interesting about this list. One of which is that you will notice that arrests for drug trafficking have gone in the opposite direction to everything else. We're seeing significant increase in arrests being made for that. Now, the reason for that is because police time has been freed up through the fact that we haven't had the nighttime economy and the other things, and they're not sat idle. They've been tasked with being proactive and going after some of those criminals that they know are out there in our community, but under normal circumstances, they wouldn't have had the resource necessarily to pin down. And so that we have seen across the county a rise in the arrests around the trafficking and supply of drugs, which I think is a very welcome thing, but it just goes to show how much more we can do with a bit more resource. And that's why it's really pleasing that we've been able to invest on that journey of having additional officers, which we'll come to in a little bit. But as I say, these figures are there for you to see. You can look at these at your leisure. And if you have any questions at the end of the presentation, or indeed afterwards when you've thought a little bit more about it, we'll happily come back to you on it. Next slide, please. But as we say, it's not all about crime. It's around 4 out of 5 calls that Lincolnshire Police receives that's not reporting a crime. So there's a huge amount of calls that come in that are about a number of things, and that can be all sorts of issues and incidents, but a large part of police officer time is dealt looking for missing people. And we have done a huge amount of work about 18 months ago to try and work with some areas that we know are creating, inadvertently largely, but they're creating additional amounts of people that become missing persons. And you can see on there, COVID has had an effect, no question, but also the work we've done has had an effect. So if you look at that, in Lincolnshire alone, nearly 1,500 children have been reported missing in the last 12 months, and that's a reduction of 25% on the year before. That's a staggering statistic. And over 1,000 adults, and that's a 35% reduction. Now, there's a lot of work that's gone on to work with nursing homes where people initially were going missing in the night, etc., and were very vulnerable and needed support quickly to be found. And equally, private children's homes are another area where that's been a problem. There's no question that not having the summer trade on the East Coast has also had an impact, because we do get a number of reports of missing children and other things that happen through there. But it just goes to show again, if we can free up that time by preventing people being vulnerable in the first place, then those officers can be redeployed to do the things that the community really want them to do, which is bearing down on crime and criminals. Next slide, please. So victims are one of those groups that, in some respects, it'd be great not to need to support them because we didn't have them. But sadly, we do have victims. And the Lincolnshire response to this is that I have a in-house capability that are the first port of call. So if you're a victim of crime, the police, when they come and see you, or if it's through the control room, will give you the contact details of victim links, and they will speak to you in the first instance to make sure you've got the help and support and guidance that you need. And that can be any crime across the spectrum, whether it's something relatively minor, and I hesitate to use that term, up to the most serious of crimes. And, you know, it's really important that we're there to support victims. We've created a new victims website, which you can see on there, victims links. That translates into a number of different languages. It provides a one-stop shop of an index of all of the various services that are available, depending on what you need. So it provides a huge amount of information, but that's backed up by real people based in HQ here that answer the phone and are there to help and support and guide. And that's a really important thing, because there will be people that aren't ready to report to the police, that still need victim services. And hopefully through the help and support they get, it will make them feel more able, more confident to report those crimes. So it's a really important part of the process. Next slide, please. So this again is talking specifically to Skegness. We have created with the force a new pilot scheme in 4 locations across the county, and Skegness is one of those 4 locations. And the purpose of this is to really find solutions of bringing the community together, helping make sure that we keep them as crime-free as possible, and actually coming up with initiatives that actually will really make a difference to them. So they are absolutely involved in not just having conversations with us about how this works, but actually in choosing what some of the outcomes are. And the idea is that ultimately this scheme will be continued without as much intervention by the police. So we've already done the phase 1, which is engagement with partners and stakeholders. That's ongoing. The training and development work has already been completed. The next stage would have been to hold a physical event, which is called a World Cafe event. And the idea is that we bring residents together to say, you know, what are the issues across the community? You know, and in your case, that could be very different in summer and winter. And we might well be able to do that physically if we delay it further, but we might have to do it virtually. And the idea is really to engage residents with that. So I'm more keen to do it physically if we can. And the idea is that that will start bringing out some of the problems and actually people start talking about solutions. We have this participatory budgeting. The idea of that is that there is an amount of money to help them start working up some solutions. So that we've put £25,000 into this per pilot area, and most of that is developing it and everything else. And then on top, there is £5,000 as part of that budgeting that ultimately the residents that are involved with this will be able to spend to say, well, these are the areas we want to look at. This is the kind of thing we want to see. And the idea is that other partners can get involved and can add to it. But initially, that's what we use to get this going. So it's an ongoing project. We will evaluate it at the end. And the district council in your area has been very supportive of this. And I've got, you know, every faith that we can really make a difference to people feeling safer, being safer, reporting more, because that's the other thing. We want people to feel empowered to report crime. And all too often people say, oh, well, I didn't report it. Well, if we don't know about it, we can't do anything about it. And that's really important. Next slide, please. So this just gives you a day in the life of. So this is just a typical day in Lincolnshire Police. I won't again go into it in huge detail, but you can see there's a myriad of different things, whether it's 10 reports of missing persons, 35 arrests, 35 concerns for safety, which aren't necessarily missing people, but that could be somebody ringing up and saying, I haven't seen my nan for a couple of weeks and I'm a bit worried, or she hasn't rung me when she always rings me on a Thursday and she didn't. And the police have to obviously get involved to make sure people are safe. If you'll notice, compared to some parts of the country, our stop searches are quite low, so around 6 a day. It's gone up slightly, but nevertheless, they're very well targeted towards intelligence-led policing. So it is something I think as a tactic works. It's something that, where appropriate, I'm very supportive of there being more of it, but it needs to be that it's serving a purpose. And in particular, one of the things that we've seen a growth in nationally is around people carrying weapons, knives in particular. And it's absolutely imperative that we keep those off Lincolnshire streets. Next slide, please. So the online world is the biggest challenge really that there is out there for policing. You are 20 times more likely to be a victim of crime online than you are in the physical world. And that's a real challenge because we don't have 20 times more officers sat at computers trying to tackle that. We do have some people, both locally and as part of our regional organised crime unit, working in the undercover space to try and protect children, for example. But the way out of this is an educational route largely. We have many things that we've been doing to try and make people more aware of fraud, of scams, businesses, how to stay safe so that they're not losing vast sums of money, romance frauds, where people are trying to take people's life savings through convincing them that they're in love with them through dating and all sorts of different horrible things. And on top of that, you have hate crimes and everything. So we're doing a lot of education at the school level, but actually one of the challenges is we're going through a unique period of history. This is the only time we will ever have analog parents with digital children. In the future, those kids will grow up and they will understand the technology that they're talking to their children about. At the moment, we have a situation where often children know far more about the technology than the parents who are trying to keep them safe. And that is a particular challenge. So working with parents to get them to understand what they need to do to try and keep their own children safe while they're upstairs in their bedroom is key. And all too often, younger people, particularly university age, are targeted for scams because they're very trusting of the technology. So they'll happily click on links, download apps, and often that can be the way that people will get into your system. So in a number of different ways, the online world is one that we're grappling with, but it is a growing threat to everybody. And in our annual survey this year, normally the number one concern of residents is around burglary and people breaking into the home and theft from the home. This year, the number one concern came out as being online crimes. And that was a really interesting shift. Now, in part, I'm thinking, will it change again next year? So while everybody's been locked in their home all year, are they less worried about burglary, for example? And they're sat using their computer more, so are they now more worried about that? So it might revert back, but nevertheless, it was a very interesting change. Next slide, please. So one of the big problems we have faced is a growing challenge this year around assaults on police officers and COVID being used as a weapon. We often get people biting, spitting, obviously hitting, kicking police officers, and it's never acceptable. But the COVID situation has emboldened some to say, oh, well, I've got COVID, and they'll be coughing or spitting at people. And you can imagine the stress and trauma that puts the officers under. And in particular, if they believe the person might have hepatitis or HIV and they've bitten them and broken the skin and those kind of problems, or they've spat into their mouths, which is something that happens. So we're working really hard with the Police Federation to make sure that their members, the police officers, have got the tools for the job to keep them safe. And in particular, we've introduced spit guards, which if somebody does spit at or try to bite a police officer, they are put in until they reach custody. Obviously, the officers are fully trained on their use, and we've now had those as of this coming April. It'll be 2 years since we rolled them out. We have not had one single complaint against an officer for their use, which tells me a lot about the professionalism of the officers that are using them. Tasers are there to protect the officers. They're there to protect the public, and actually they are there to protect a perpetrator too, because often they're only fired infrequently. They are pointed at people more frequently. So it's about 36 to 1. So if you can imagine that the taser is pointed at you, the officer's telling you they have a taser, they'll fire the taser, it often will get people to comply without the need to fire the taser. Now, that is a lot safer for everybody than the officer needing to use a baton or spray, which is obviously put into the eyes and face. So it's a much safer way of keeping everybody safe. We were successful in getting a £140,000 bid from government to roll this out even further, which will pay for an additional 170 tasers, bringing us up to about 350 in Lincolnshire. And that's the vast majority of our frontline officers that are out on the streets. And that really does make a big difference to the morale of the officers, but obviously to our safety too. Next slide, please. And one of the things that's particularly been interesting is the fact that when we record antisocial behaviour statistics, part of that is now the issuing of COVID fixed penalty notices and people's breaches of that. And this gives you a snapshot of what has happened in Lincolnshire. We're about mid-table for the issuing of them, and that feels about right. There's often quite a lot that are issued to people that have come from out of county trying to get into Lincolnshire for various reasons. The vast majority of Lincolnshire residents have worked really, really hard to try and comply with the rules, and the police's view is very much to try and educate, not to reach for the fixed penalty notice. You were talking about repeat offenders, you're talking about people that blatantly are trying desperately to ignore it, and in some cases people that are courting the controversy of getting a fixed penalty notice. And you know, I think they've done exceptionally well to manage a very difficult position. And as I say, I think it's going to be a real test as we go the other way and things start to open up. And in particular, we're very alive to the challenges of large influx of residents from elsewhere coming to enjoy the East Coast, and we want to work with councils to make sure that that works as smoothly as possible. Next slide, please. So partnership working is vital for us, and this was around fly tipping, this particular photograph, and it's something where fly tipping it remains a big concern, and in particular at the moment, I think because the recycling centres haven't been open in the way they normally would, we have seen a rise in people abusing that. And it's largely not your individual citizen putting stuff in their car and dumping it, although that does happen. It's often people who go to Facebook pages and other places and say, does anybody know somebody with a van who could get rid of a garden full of stuff for me? And that van turns up, they give them their stuff, pay their 40 quid or whatever, and have no idea that that person is about to go and dump it in the nearest lay-by. And we've got a load of work to do to try and educate our communities that is what happens when you get a white van man and pay him 40 quid. There are some brilliant people who own vans, who run businesses responsibly, but we need to be seeing, making sure people look at their waste carrier's license, they get a copy of their registration number, etc., so that if their stuff does get dumped, then they've got somebody to actually say, well, this is the person that collected my rubbish, because the homeowner is liable if that rubbish then turns up dumped somewhere. And that is something that most people do not realize, that they remain liable because it is still their rubbish that's been dumped. So there's a huge amount of work we do to try and change the ways that different agencies work together, and fly tipping is one of those where there's a huge amount of work going on to make it better all the time, and some huge strides have been made. It's just been countered a bit this year by the changes to society that have made it more attractive to people to dump things. Next slide, please. So the future, well, the immediate future is not looking bad at all. I mean, last year we recruited 120 police officers, which was the highest number on record. The coming financial year, we're set to recruit another 120 officers. And so the numbers of officers across the county is growing. Now, we lose between 50 and 60 every year through retirement and leavers, etc. So across those 2 years, that's still a substantial increase. So I would expect that by 23-24, we could be looking at the highest number of police officers Lincolnshire's ever had, which was around 1,250. But as you'll appreciate, the officers that have started with us this very week will take some time to train, go through their probationary period before they are up to speed and out in the community in a meaningful way. And one of the things we have invested in, which is due to open in April, is a lot. I'm sure you will all know the old magistrates court in Skegness, which is next to the police station. I purchased that from the Ministry of Justice some time ago, and we have been successful in turning that into a state-of-the-art police training centre. And the idea of that is that we will be training police recruits from the East for the East. It's an investment in your community to say, we need cops who come from your area, we'll train them there and they can serve their time there, and it will bring in jobs, it will bring in sort of much needed police presence to the area. And part of today's announcement of the Town Deal Fund, which you'll be aware of, is to support the completion of that project. So I'm exceptionally pleased to see that our bid has been successful. We're yet to dot the I's and cross the T's on that, but that investment in Skegness is really, really welcome, because it does mean that we'll have a training centre over here on the west and a training centre on the east to make sure, and it's not just the initial training, it's when they need other training. So whether that's taser training, public protection training, all different things that they have to do throughout their career, we will have a centre based on the East. So when your officers need to leave the front line and do their training, you're not losing them for twice as long because they've got to come across the county. So that is where we are. We've got a number of projects ongoing, which I think are really exciting. We're investing in the future, and I would have to say it's the most optimistic I've been. When I think back to when I first stood to do this back in 2016, and somebody said to me, "Why would you want to do that? They're all but bankrupt." And then when I started, and the chief constable said, "You know, we're all but bankrupt," and I knew I was in for an uphill struggle. But here we are. We've made some progress, and you know, seeing the numbers of cops go up, the investment in technology being there, the new training centre on the East, I think it's all good news. So with that, I'll happily take any questions, Chairman, that you might have.
Thank you. I'd like to thank you, Mark, for an in-depth presentation there. Very good. I did get a message sent through to me earlier on in the week. If I could read the question out to you, it's from Councillor Danny Brooks at the time, and it's an important question. We're going to be expecting a very busy summer on the coast this year. Will you be allocating extra resources to Skegness due to the added pressure the police will be under this year?
I think it's a really important question, and what I would say is it is absolutely on the Chief Constable's radar. We've got a new Chief Constable. He started at the beginning of the year, but he is by no means new to being a police officer and indeed working in Lincolnshire. So before he started with us, he was the head of the Regional Organised Crime Unit, working across 5 forces. He's hit the ground running with transforming various elements of the force. We've already had meetings about, you know, what's going to happen with the easing of restrictions, the importance of getting that right for the people on the East Coast, where it will affect more than anywhere else. And ultimately, the deployment of officers is one that I do not interfere with in any way, shape or form. It is an operational decision for the chief. But he is very aware that this is going to be a huge challenge. So I'm under no illusion that he will need to take resources from elsewhere in the county at times to ensure that the staff on the East have got the resilience they need. So I can't give you an assurance that I will, because it's not for me to do that, but I can tell you that as part of my gaining assurance from the Chief Constable role, I do ask him these questions. I do ask him for where his assurance comes from about preparedness for easing of lockdown, but also for the summer trade here, but equally it might be haircutting season later in the year somewhere else. So they're our normal conversations. So I would assure you that those conversations are ongoing, and I'm no doubt at all that our Chief Constable is up to the task.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Adrian Finlay, please.
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. I think it's fantastic, very detailed, and looks quite promising. I do have a little bit of a concern about it, which is sort of knocking on from what Councillor Danny Brooks has just put to you. You say that you're adding another 120 frontline officers by the end of the financial year, hoping to have 1,130 officers, which is great. We have had the police on here before that have actually told us that at any one time in Skegness, we've got between 3 and 6 officers. Well, if there's 3 and 6 officers in Skegness at any one time, and you've got nearly 12, well over 1,100 officers, and we are quite densely populated during the summer at Skegness, it concerns me that you've got all these officers and we don't seem to have a lot. And the other thing is, obviously, when you ring up during the daytime with a crime, no matter how large or small, the crime numbers reach into the hundreds when you report on that particular day, on that date. And yet, according to your figures of the Skegness crime for 21, you've got 2,861, which is giving you just short of 8 crimes a day. I just think it's a phenomenal amount of numbers when you're clocking up hundreds of crime numbers in a day to only actually have 7.8 reported crimes in a day. And some of the concern is obviously there's an increase to the taxpayers to allow you to spend these millions of pounds of future investment, and you've got some fantastic kit, but will Skegness see any of it? You know, the millions of pounds of extra investment, I know what you've just said at the end of your presentation, which I think is promising, as regards the training centre, but when are you expected to start pulling out young trainees, and obviously these young trainees are going to need to be accompanied by an officer. So will you be taking them inland to get further training before they return back, or have you got big plans to put more officers in Skegness with these trainers to train them in Skegness? It's just one big. It just seems a lot you're taking on. I mean, I know you put a lot of time and effort into it, but you seem to be a lot you're taking on. And when you look at what you've listed of your responsibilities and your crime numbers in relation to what you're offering and what we're getting, I just think it's not fair on us on the East Coast, even though you've got good plans to give us plenty. So my two questions is, are we getting any of these extra officers on the East Coast? And when are you expected to pull trainees out of the training centre?
Yeah, and I mean, there was a lot in there. And I mean, obviously, what I've tried to do is condense a vast amount of information into a presentation I could give you in a reasonable amount of time. So there's an awful lot of stuff I haven't told you. But to address the questions, the training centre will open in April. The recruits that are going to be based in there are already in training now. So they started on the 1st of March. There were 60 new recruits started. 30 of them are destined to come to the east in April, and the other 30 will be trained in the west. And the reason they're being trained in the east is because they're going to the east of the county. Now, it doesn't just mean Skegness, it also means Louth, for example, and Mablethorpe, and the east. The west, obviously, is everything else. So that's all the way down to Stamford, as well as Lincoln and Gainsborough. So it's quite it's half the county. But that's 30 new officers. Now, you're quite right. They have to be trained and everything else, but they are destined for Skegness. Now, because the way nationally police training has changed, where most forces have now gone to the system where you must either join with a degree or attain a degree during your training, which means probationers now take 3 years to train. Lincolnshire have resisted this because I fundamentally am opposed to it on the basis that I don't think that having a degree automatically makes you a good cop. There are people that have served in Afghanistan for 8 years who have got an awful lot to offer Lincolnshire police and our public that may not have a degree. So I think some life skills and the 2-year training model we have is by far and away a better system. And we're fighting that nationally to stop it becoming mandatory. What that means is the amount of time I seem to think, and I could be wrong, so I'm not going to guarantee it's this, but I seem to think it's about 13 weeks. And then officers start to work from their location. So if that's Skegness, it's relatively short period of time. It's just over 3 months. Then they will start their frontline work going out with another officer. So after about a year, they start independent patrol. So their second year of probation, they are still an independent patrolling police officer. So that gives you an idea. It's about a year of training. But they are of value to us as soon as they come out of that 13-week period. Obviously, we did recruit cops last year, the year before. So there is a continual sort of assembly line. But last year and next year are our 2 first real big years of growth. So that's when we'll see it grow. Regarding specifics around why there's 1,100 yet so few, well, you can imagine you've got 3 shift patterns to cover the entire county. In addition to that, you have specialist units. So you've got CID, you've got child protection, you've got vulnerable people, you've got all sorts of different functions, organised crime, etc., etc. So by the time you've completed all of those specialist functions, you've then got neighbourhood policing, you've then got response policing, firearms policing. The actual number that are at any one time in a fixed location appears relatively small, but that's not the group that's actually keeping your community safe. If you imagine, if somebody needs a cop, they call 999 because it's an emergency. Lincolnshire has got amongst the very highest response times, the best response times in the country. So 94.8% of all 999 calls get answered within 10 seconds. In urban areas, the response time to actually arrive for an emergency, again, is beating target. So our target in an urban area is 15 minutes. 15 minutes. And in a rural area, 20 minutes. As an average over the entire year, Lincolnshire Police have hit both of those, which is the first time in certainly since I've been here that they've been able to do that. So their response times are getting better, their call handling times are better. But actually, if you actually call out a cop and there's been a crime, You need the CID officer, you need the forensics officer, you need the people that are going to pull the case together and get it to court. All of those people ultimately supporting you. And if it's a more serious crime, it might involve the regional organised crime unit. It might involve any number of others. So it's the whole system that's brought to bear to support your residents. So it's not just the amount of cops that are physically wandering the streets at any one time. The other thing is we get around 50,000 hours of policing volunteered to us by our special constabulary. So they're fully warranted officers that give up their time for free to support us. And an amount of those, and I couldn't tell you the number, but it's over the county, there's about 140 of them at the moment. There's an amount of those that are in your area, and they supplement the police officers that are there. In particular, we get them to work when they're needed. So that's weekends, evenings, summertime. So it isn't quite as simple as this is how many cops there are. And also, because of the way it works, if there was a requirement, i.e. you had got something happening on a particular day, the chief, through his command structure, flexes where people are posted. Police officers go where they're told. So if he suddenly sees, well, actually, we need more cops in Skegness, well, they can be pulled from anywhere. I've known cops be pulled from Grantham because you've needed them in your patch. So that will happen at any one time, but it is an operational decision that the chief has to make on the fly. I think I've answered that.
Okay. Councillor Mark Anderson, please.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for your presentation, Mark. You've painted a real rosy future, and you've obviously painted a good report. But having been a victim myself of a crime in Skegness and actually going through the system, I am actually appalled at the level of service that I received from race hate crimes. And when I asked the question of how many hate crimes in Skegness, and eventually got the it was like pulling a tooth out of the police to get the actual figures of 91 in 1 year of hate crimes in Skegness where people have been abused. And I have to say, your victim support of going through that process was appalling for me. I served on the police authority 93 to 97 on the Lincolnshire County Council, and having served on the police authority and gone through the system, it is appalling. When you have officers that actually doodle when you're giving a statement and not focusing, and leave the room for half an hour, leaving you there unattended while making a statement in a police station, I find just appalling. My confidence in the police is at a low, a very low, and it will take a lot to get back and to have confidence in the police, Lincolnshire Police again. Only this week, one of my constituents rang me up to say her granddaughter was assaulted, violently assaulted in Skegness. Reported it, and the officer came back and said, there's no CCTV coverage, we can't do anything. So when has it happened that you need CCTV to investigate a crime? I just don't get it, I really do. And it's not just me that's saying this, it's a lot of people in Skegness are saying that. They got a very low confidence for the money that we pay in our council tax, and the service that we get is so poor. And can I just, one supplementary, I'd like to know in your police report why there is no figures on the actual complaints on your office as well as police as well. How many complaints in Lincolnshire have been made about the police and gone through the system?
Thank you.
Firstly, Mark, I'd have to say that, you know, it's never comfortable for me when I hear a fellow resident has had that kind of an experience. Can I just ask you, was that a long time ago? Was it 6 months, a year, 3 years?
1 year ago.
Okay, so I mean, I would be more than happy to speak to you outside of the meeting to really understand in detail your experience, because I think that learning will be really important in me, in my role of challenging the force, because it is really important that I understand people's first-hand experiences, and by the sound of it, that's something that you genuinely could help me with. So if you wish to speak to me outside the meeting, I would be more than happy to do so. Regarding the publishing, it is a matter of record, the number of complaints. We actually discussed that in a public assurance meeting that, clues in the name, I published that publicly, and we did that only a week or 10 days ago, and complaints against the force are part of that data set. So there is no hiding the complaints, that is a matter of record, and complaints against policing as a body are going up, and partly the reason they're going up is because we have just seen a change in the way they're recorded. So what constituted an official complaint, the bar was actually quite high. It was, so now if you say I'm unhappy with the service I got, that has to be recorded as a complaint. That was not the case 12 months ago. The complaints 12 months ago, there were some very strict criteria about what made a complaint. And so it's a lot more transparent now, but we will see the numbers go up. And rightly so, because that is a genuine reflection of how people are feeling. I would really like to speak to you about the understanding of what you felt wasn't right about the victim service, because generally speaking, it's considered to be an exceptional service that's better than any. I mean, it's held up as being, yeah, we've had visits from the Victims Commissioner to praise the quality of the services. We've had royal visits to praise the quality of the service. So if there's something not right about that, I absolutely want to understand it. I don't know if I've really answered your question, because I can't give you a specific about what happened in a particular case, because I'm not the police, but I absolutely can give you an assurance that I would be happy to speak to you personally and understand and take learning from that and actually feed that back in to make sure the system was improved. And I hope that would give you some comfort that, you know, I can't put right what somebody else did wrong, but I can absolutely take forward learning and try and improve the system.
Thank you. Can I
Councillor
quickly come
Anderson?
back?
Yes, please do quickly, because we've got a couple more questions.
Yeah, I actually phoned your office 3 times, Mark, and I got no response. And when I spoke to your people in your office, they didn't even have the courtesy to ring me back.
Thank you. I think that this is something that Mark and both Marks need to discuss over the not over the channels that we're speaking about. Obviously, we're going into depth. We've got a couple more questions, and I feel that you've been put on the spot. So are you okay with that, Councillor Anderson, that you speak to Councillor to Commissioner Mark Jones, please? Councillor Tony Tye, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, thank you for that, Mark. I think that was excellent that you're prepared to sit down with Mark and discuss it for your own benefit as well as his. Can I just say how pleased I am that you secured 11 extra million in funding for Lincolnshire. As we're all aware, Lincolnshire have been underfunded for the last 20 years. But then you went on to say it was for COVID, which then got the hairs on the back of the neck standing up again.
Oh, no, not 11 million for COVID.
No. So it's not, we've got 11 million extra, but that will go on for the next 10 years or whatever. Yes.
Well, yeah, I mean, basically, over the course of my term, I've had different opportunities to bid for different funding. So as opportunities come up, whether they're through the Ministry of Justice, whether they're through local government, whatever they are, big lottery funding, I make every opportunity to try and bring money into the county to spend it here. And it's actually, having totted up the figures lately, I think we're now up to about 14 million so far that we've brought in additional funding. A tiny amount of that, relatively, has been additional funding we've brought in as a result of COVID. So less than £1 million specifically. And it's not to enforce COVID, that's to literally provide the services we need to people while COVID is happening. So, for example, if you're a victim of domestic abuse and can't leave your home because you're told not to, even though the police are saying, no, you can leave your home and flee domestic abuse, we want to make sure that the services that support that have the wherewithal to then actually help those victims of crime. So we've been successful in bringing in additional funding to tackle that. It's not money to enforce COVID.
Thanks for that, Mark. That was excellent stuff. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Billy Brooks, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everyone. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Jones, for your presentation. I thought it was very interesting, and it was good to see that there's been specifically designed ATVs for dealing with the sand, because I know last year I seen a few incidences where the ones that weren't designed for it didn't deal particularly well. So just with regards to the ATVs, what is their main purpose? What sort of incidents where will they come into their own, as it was? Second question is just with regards to, you mentioned missing people and missing people reports. After, you know, lockdown finishes or you know, people start losing their jobs or things like that, I feel like there could be some long-term effects where things like missing people could increase. So what sort of things do you think could be put in place to, you know, try and keep that number down without letting it spiral out of control? And also, just finally, I know for a while Lincolnshire Police didn't take up the recommended degree standard for becoming a police officer. Is that something that they are now doing, or where do Lincolnshire Police stand on having to have a degree to become an officer? Thank you.
Okay, the ATVs, they cover a number of things. Firstly, they look quite quirky, so they're really good for engagement, particularly in the summer if you want to engage with people to give them advice on safety and whatever. So they're quite useful for that. They're particularly useful to get from A to B along the beach quickly because nothing else will do it. So if you're told, for example, that there is a missing child on the beach somewhere, we can cover a large amount of ground very quickly in searching for that child. And the ATV that we've brought in, we've had specially designed, so it's got searchlight on it, it's got loudspeakers on it. So unlike the others, you're able to actually shout that you're looking for a child in a red coat, has anybody seen them, etc. They can also be used to search the dunes because of the searchlight capability, and there are all sorts of nefarious activities that can happen in those dunes of an evening. And so they will be used for that. And sadly, sometimes people lose their lives in the sea, and sometimes it's necessary for the police to get there quite quickly to secure the scene, etc., etc. And it's another way that police can get there. It also is a vehicle that, because it's got a sort of trailer on the back, it can carry things like the drones and things like that we can deploy, which would give us another aerial capability. So it covers a number of different things, and it's a very cost-effective way, because, I mean, you're talking £15,000 for one of these, a real cost-effective way of supporting a large number of people. You're right about the missing persons thing, and actually mental health generally, and that's one thing that I'm particularly passionate about, how we actually as public sector partners support the community to keep them from episodes that can lead to real distress and need police intervention around mental health. And we've done a number of things around that already. I have got mental health nurses that work from the force control room, and in the first year that post was there, they helped 1,257 people, and they diverted around 250 that would have ended up in custody, but actually they were able to get them either to their doctor or to get medical care to them, and diverted a similar amount away from A&E, saving the NHS money. That whole project cost me £60,000 in the first year, and it saved I say countless. Yes, you can count it, but it was hundreds of thousands of pounds. The mental health nurse professionals have been expanded, so we now have them for longer hours. We also have triage cars. So we have 2 cars in Lincolnshire which we can deploy, and they can be deployed by the nurse in the control room, and they have mental health professional on. They don't have a cop, and that's a partnership piece of work. So if somebody is having a mental health episode, we can deploy a fast car on blue light with a mental health professional, because often if a police officer turns up, that just makes the whole thing 10 times worse and ends up in an arrest. And there's around 625 people a year that are sectioned under the Mental Health Act, Section 136, the Mental Health Act, by the police in Lincolnshire. And it used to be the case that the vast majority ended up being taken to custody as a place of safety because there was nowhere to take them. In the last 12 months, only one person has ended up in custody, and that was because they were in custody at the time they were sectioned, so they weren't taken there at all. So that's a huge success that we've had in avoiding people that need mental health support being put in custody. So I think that is a growing concern, but we're doing an awful lot of partnership work around it. The degrees, I am fundamentally opposed to it being a mandatory thing. I am absolutely welcoming of cops with degrees. There are about a third of Lincolnshire police that have a degree, which is roughly the same as society. And I thought policing was meant to be representative of the society it served. So I'm more than happy with that. Equally, if we have direct entry routes and fast track, that's all fine. What I'm opposed to is saying nobody can join the police unless they've either got a degree or immediately gain one. I just don't see the benefit to anybody in that. And as I say, I mean, it was put to me by a police officer, if it's 2 a.m. and it's kicking off outside of a nightclub and I see a bunch of guys fighting and I jump out of my car, I would rather the person next to me had done 8 years in Afghanistan than 3 years in Nottingham doing an expressive dance degree. And it's one of those things where degrees are important, but they're not everything. And life skills are important, and they're not everything, but we need a blend because policing is about having that blend. So while ever possible, I will be fighting to prevent it becoming mandatory. And only this week, I've written another letter to number 10, pushing my case on that.
Okay, thank you. Can I thank you, Mark Jones, for attending tonight and giving us that presentation, answering all the questions. And I'm sure Councillor Anderson will be in touch outside of this meeting. So I thank you. You can stay if you wish, but I'm sure you've got better things to be getting on with and fighting for more funding. So I thank you.
And thank you all very much. And yes, Mark, please do get in touch. I would like to speak to you. Thank you and good evening to you all.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 2, the minutes of the last meeting. They're attached, pages 56.
Yeah, I'll move them, Mr. Mayor.
57, 58, 59 and 60. I've got a mover, Councillor Anderson. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Barry, thank you. All in favour, please show. Thank you. Agenda item number 3, to note apologies received by the town clerk prior to the meeting.
Mayor, we have apologies from councillors Cunnington, Edgington and S. Kirk.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 4, to receive any declarations of interest. Councillor Dennis.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I'm trying to get my hand down and I'm struggling a bit. Sorry, but I have got an interest in if the accounts are coming up, if they are, then it can be put into the waiting room, please. Be much appreciated.
Okay, thank you. I'm having a problem putting my hand up as well virtually, so I don't know what's changed tonight. But we'll get through this. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 5, public participation. Residents of Skegness are invited to send questions by email at any item on the published agenda to arrive at info@skegness.council.org.uk no later than noon on Tuesday, the 2nd of March. They'll be published with the minutes together with the council's response. Any comments relevant to the council decisions will be read out during this item, limited to no more than 1 per resident, and the total of what can be achieved is 15 minutes in accordance with the order received. Town clerk.
We've had no question.
I didn't have time from leaving the other meeting, town clerk, to ask the question, so sorry about that. Moving on to agenda item number 6, town mayor's announcements. Everything is listed on the website, Twitter account. I did pay my respects to my deputy, Jim Carpenter, yesterday, Councillor Jim Carpenter, and said my farewells to him. Also tonight, I do believe that we've got some good news just to tell you, actually, that's coming from the town clerk. That we've had a positive response from David Ross Education Trust following our letter, following the town clerk's letter on behalf of the council. He will send a letter to the next council in April, but in the short term, the published admissions number is going to remain at 132. So I think that's a positive result for this council. And they will be, there's plenty to go into, and that will be brought to the next meeting. Moving on to agenda item number 7, schedule of payments for approval. Put Councillor Dennis in the waiting room, please.
Yeah, I'll move them, Mr. Mayor.
Second, do we have a seconder?
I'm quite happy seconding, Mark. I mean, Mr. Mayor, sorry.
That's okay. All in favour, please show. I am agreeing, but I can't seem to get my hand to work tonight. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 8. Councillor questions to the Mayor, none received. Agenda item number 9, questions and comments to Lincolnshire Police Representative, none received. And agenda item number 10, reports from council representatives to the outside bodies, none received. Moving on to agenda item 11, reports by district and county councillors, which are attached. Councillor Dankirk, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have a Colin Haig that's in the meeting. I'm not sure if you're aware of that, and we haven't seen his face, so we don't actually know if it is Colin. I just wondered if he had anything to share.
Mayor, Colin Haig is our new police inspector. Well, for many of you, you will have known him from a few years back as
Welcome
the police
back.
inspector. But he's joined us tonight as the police representative.
Thank you. Good evening, Colin. I did think it was you. We do know who you are, so thank you for joining us. Councillor Anderson. Sorry, you got your hand up.
Sorry,
Okay.
my hand was just left.
So I'm having problems with mine. Okay. You've got the reports, councillors, in front of you, Councillor Dankirk. Agenda item number 11 we're on.
Yeah, we moved so quickly, Mr. Mayor, with the hands not showing up and things like that. I just wanted an opportunity, if I may, just to ask the police representative about the challenges of COVID enforcement and how that's going to impact especially the coming recent weeks of our seafronts being really, really busy. Obviously, Mark Jones was coming from a direction strategy point of view, whereas Colin can talk on a operational perspective. So I wanted an update, if possible, please, with regards to the number of large quantity of visitor influx into the town and what the police are doing about it. Because our previous representative was quite clear that there's been plenty of time for education now. That has been and gone, the education phase. Of course, I appreciate there's still a certain amount of education required, but this was very much now everybody knows the situation, if not the serious issues. And I'd like to, if possible, to have a little brief update with, especially in regards to the large quantities of visitors we've seen over recent weekends.
Thank you. Colin?
Yep, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I can answer that. Thank you, Councillor Kirk. And following what Inspector Barnsley, I'm sure, updated you with, the force priority is engagement and education. And I agree, we've had plenty of time. We've had a year to educate people. People know the rules, they then choose to disobey them. So the force approach is to continue with the engagement and then use enforcement if that doesn't work. So it is a tool we've got in our toolbox. It is something we do use. And I know it's received a lot of press coverage in the region, especially in Cleethorpes. And I know the police in Cleethorpes have responded. And Lincolnshire take the same approach as what our colleagues on the side do. Engagement, education, and then we use enforcement as a last resort. But it is something we have gone to quite quickly and we do on a regular basis. So I will keep you informed of the numbers, especially when the gates do open again in the next few weeks, because I think it's safe to say we can expect droves of people returning back to the coast. foreign holidays look like they're going to be a no-go for the next few months, if not the next year. So I think it's safe to say we will be really busy, and I will keep this council informed of the ticket numbers.
Would you like to come back, Councillor Kirk?
If I may, thank you for that response, Colin. It was explicitly clear to members in this meeting, I appreciate you weren't here, but there was going to be more of an enforcement approach. There is a bit of confusion still with regards to how far is too far to travel for your exercise. And I appreciate we are blessed with some of the best beaches, you know, in the area. But how far is too far? And what is the police's approach if they were to challenge a vehicle registered from, say, an LN postcode or an NG postcode? I mean, you have this data to hand, I would expect. What is the police's approach with regards to the large influx of visitors when it should be for essential travel only?
Yeah, I can give you my take on that. I know our colleague in Humberside has been talking about guidance. The government have legislated its law, so what they haven't done is defined that law very well. So there is a grey area, but police are used to using grey areas and dealing with grey areas. So it's up to individual officers' discretion. Now, if you're asking me that question, which I think you are, I will answer that. If somebody's travelling from Lincoln to come to Skegness for their exercise, that is in breach of the regulations. If they're travelling from Spilsby, I would say that is in breach of the regulations, because there's areas to walk and exercise within the Spilsby area. If you're going out with your area, the government haven't defined what your local area is, but that's where the police use their discretion. So we would engage with them. We would try the education, and then we would look to enforce if it is something which is unreasonable. So to answer your question, Grantham and Lincoln, I would say, is an unreasonable excuse, and that would lead to a ticket.
Thank you. Councillor Mark Anderson.
Yeah, my apologies, Mr. Mayor. I didn't realise Colin was here. Hi, Colin. Colin, can I just ask a question? In my role, I'm a COVID marshal. Okay, I have to go around making sure that people social distance in the company that I do work. And yes, they do, because I'm there. My concern is that East Lindsey's on the rise again with COVID cases coming in on last night's report, and Boston's pretty high, and South Holland's one of the hotspots in the UK when it comes to COVID. My concern is I'm not talking about small businesses, I'm talking the bigger businesses in Skegness, i.e. supermarkets, where there seems to be no control by managers, etc., in social distancing with their employees and putting the whole community at risk because of what is happening. I've had numerous reports, and I've seen with my own eyes some of the things that are going on, and it's just appalling. And all it's doing is raising the infection rate in our community because the government guidelines aren't being imposed. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin.
Sorry, Councillor Anderson, what is your question regarding that? Just so I can answer as best as I can.
Enforcement, Colin. Enforcement, basically.
Right. So as my previous answer to Councillor Kirk, the police will try the engagement approach, we'll try the education, we will work with the local resilience forum who take the lead. It's led by public health who sit within the LRF. So if all that doesn't work, we will then go and speak. But as we know, the police have got limited resources. If we then spend time patrolling supermarkets and not patrolling crime hotspots, crime will then significantly go up, and then obviously we'll be focusing on the COVID, which the government have employed COVID marshals to do. So it's working with our partners to make sure we get the best response. I don't think that's necessarily a police issue, but we can contribute. It's just that if we're contributing towards that, we're not doing what you would expect us to do in relation to crime. Does that answer your question?
Councillor Anderson.
Yes, but having lost, Colin, I'll be honest, 5 members of my family with COVID, it is important to some people in the community that some of the issues that I just said get dealt with. It's just the enforcement issues, because if you ask for a COVID marshal who has no powers apart from telling somebody you need to stand away and social distance, whether they take notice or not, it's up to them. Thank you.
And it's at that stage when the COVID marshal should elevate it to the police, and we should expect a police response. It's just that, again, if the COVID marshal cannot engage and educate, it's then a police officer who's attending. That police officer could be doing something else. So we don't want to see that. We don't want to see police officers being used in that way, but we are prepared for them to be used in that way, because, like you say, it's about keeping people safe and stopping the spread of infection. Because if it spreads at the rate it has spread in the last few months, I appreciate most areas going down, some areas it's slightly on the upward trend again, but we don't want to be in lockdown any longer than we need to be. So applying common sense and then using the police if you need the police. We're always available for calls like that.
Thank you. Councillor Steve Empson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question for Colin. So what happened this weekend then with the amount of people that was on the beach sunbathing from all over the country, not just from Skegness and the surrounding areas, people from Nottingham, Sheffield. There was all here this weekend when the sun was shining. I just sort of, what is your response to this? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. But I think I can refer to my previous answers. If you're asking me what my response to that is, it's people shouldn't be doing it. We need people to take personal responsibility. If they don't comply, and we got our first taste this weekend of what it's going to be like for the next few weeks. So I officially start back in Skegness next week. I'll give you the reassurance that one of my focuses will be on COVID enforcement and engagement. That's what the public have told us they wanted to focus on. I have 3 priorities. 2 are speeding, 1 is COVID enforcement. That's one of the things I'll be working with Skegness Town Council and other councils in my area to make sure we deliver in the way that you want it to be delivered. So if you're asking me what we're going to do about people from Sheffield and Nottingham coming to Skegness, they will receive a fine if that's the case.
Thank you. Councillor Tony Tyre, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good to see you back, Colin. What I was going to ask is there any chance that you could start using the vehicle recognition, driving up and down the main road of Skegness? I know I walk the dogs on every day of the week, and when I get to the Grand Parade Central South Parade, it is absolutely packed with vehicles. Now, these are not local vehicles. These are from wherever. Thank you.
Yes. So just to give you some reassurance, there's number plate recognition cameras on the A158 all the way to Lincoln and then surrounding Skegness. So they are checked, they are monitored in our force control room. So we know where vehicles are coming from. And it's and I know what you're saying about South Parade, because South Parade is unusually busy at this time of year. But also to give you some reassurance around that, we know a lot of people who live on South Parade are parking the vehicles there, and it's not the holiday lets what historically used to dominate South Parade. There's quite a few people who live there now. Quite a few of those people have got access to vehicles. So that, I know that has been checked recently because that was a concern by a member of the public. The car parks are reassuringly empty, and I checked that myself yesterday because I was down there. I live in Skegness. I spend a lot of my time walking down there. I know what the case is with South Parade car parks and Festival Esplanade. They have been empty, but it was something we will keep an eye on and we will monitor, because we are expecting, as we saw at the weekend, people to start pushing it. And we can't allow them to come back too soon. We don't want to impact on the economy of Skegness, but we've got to apply common sense, and we will make sure Skegness is safe before we allow visitors back.
Thanks for that, Colin.
Okay, thank you, Colin. I'd like to thank you for answering the questions for us tonight, and it is good to see you back after a long time since you've been, well, we're not in the chamber tonight, we're in the Zoom meeting.
No, thank you, Mr. Mann. It's good to be back. I left 4 years ago to go and do something else for 3 months, and it's taken me 4 years to work my way back. So I'm really pleased to be back in my hometown and in the job that I've enjoyed the most out of my 20 odd years of policing. So I'm really looking forward to the summer and working with you all again.
As I said, it's good to see you back. I've seen you walking your dog, but so you've always been here, but it's good to see you back. Thank you. Okay, that was moving back.
Mr. Mayor, just on that, Mr.
Yeah.
Mayor, I'm going to drop out now. So I am available as of next week. I will be back in Skegness. I have been dipping my toe in as I left my last job at the temporary mortuary. I've moved away from that now. I'll start back in Skegness on Monday. So if anybody needs me, you've got my details, or Mr. Larner can share my details, and then I'll get back to you as soon as I can. So I'll bid you good night, and thank you for letting me contribute tonight.
Thank you for your time. Thank you, Colin. We move back to agenda. If anybody's just joined us, we move back to, we was on a few issues with the hand raising, and Councillor Kirk raised an issue. So that was agenda item number 9. We've had the comments we've received. So we're moving on to agenda item number 10. Reports from council representative to the outside bodies that was none received. Agenda item number 11, reports by district and county councillors which are attached. Lincolnshire County Council March 2021 report provided by Councillor C. Macy and S. Kirk.
Yeah, I'll move their notice, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Anderson. Do I have a seconder, please?
Yeah, I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Didn't see who that was. Who, sorry, was that? Was it Councillor?
It was me, Mark.
Councillor Emerson. Okay, thank you. All in favour, please show. Thank you. Got my hand working again now, so well, thank you. Moving on to the next agenda item number 12, the management committee meeting. The minutes are attached to approve and adopt otherwise. The resolutions were within the minutes of the management committee meeting held on Wednesday, the 17th of February 2021, and adapt and approve policies.
Yeah, I'll move it, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Do I have a seconder?
I can second it, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. All in favour, please show. Agenda item number 13, review of the corporate governance 2020-2021 report and appendices attached to review the effectiveness of the council's internal controls, including risk management and governance. Town Clerk, please.
This is a regular report. Many of you will recognise it from previous years. It's something that you're required to do every year before we submit the final accounts, which obviously is now almost upon us in terms of the end of the financial year at the end of March. So it basically sets out how the council operates to ensure that it manages its risks, how it has internal controls that protect the council and the council taxpayer, and it has statements that the council are making about how that's undertaken. I draw your attention in Appendix B. There is a minor change to the methodology for risk management, and that's really to in relation to risks that have a high impact but may have a very low chance of occurring, and in those cases they will be classified within our traffic light system of being amber. So even though, for example, they may be very, very unlikely to happen, if they do happen, they could have catastrophic impacts for the council and for local residents. And therefore, by keeping those at amber, it means that we are constantly monitoring for such an occurrence. So that's just a minor amendment in the risk management scheme. You'll also notice in that appendix, which I mean normally goes to management committee for regular monitoring. I have, you'll see highlighted, there are a few areas where I've changed the risk score of the situation once management controls have been put in place. And there's a few updates on in those. Sorry. I also need this evening just to show you the certificate of insurance. Again, this is one of the checks and balances that it has been brought before council. So I can share that with you now. So I'm going to share those if I can find them. It's not always that easy to right. So there's the employer's liability. I'm going to stop sharing that one and I'm going to share the other one. Is the
Mr. Clark, I think you're sharing a window instead of your entire screen, so we're only able to see your Windows Explorer page and not the documents.
So you can't see that document?
You're sharing a window instead of a whole, your entire screen.
We can't see that, Town Clerk.
Right.
Do you want me to try and put them on, Town Clerk?
Possibly, yeah. If you can, I can't. I'm seeing it as if it's coming up, but
we're there. Thank you, Kate.
so you've seen those now. And then you've got the recommendations in front of you. So that is to approve the statement of internal controls, which is set out in Appendix A, to update to approve the updated risk policy in Appendix B, to approve the risk register in Appendix C, consider any changes that you want to see to those documents, approve the governance statement in Appendix D, and confirm that the council's internal controls are effective and fit for purpose, which, if you combine all of those documents together and read the statements, hopefully that achieves that aim.
Thank you, Councillor Danker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to propose, if we're able to accept all the recommendations on block. I personally haven't identified any items for item D that need changing, so I'm happy to propose that we adopt the we approve the recommendations on block. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brennan. Councillor Jimmy Brooks. All in favour, please show. Okay, we're going to take these on block then. We'll approve the recommendations. All in one block. Everybody with hands. Thank you. Was that the proposal that we take them all on block? Was it Councillor Kirk, or was that the vote as well, all included? That was just to propose that we take them all in one block, all on block.
Mr. Mayor, I believe there's been a bit of confusion because I think everybody was voting in favour of doing them all on block. So you might want to.
I'll just clarify then that we are voting for these. We've got that we're taking them on block. So all in favour that we take them on block and vote at the same time. All please raise your hands again.
Thank you.
Seem to have a few gremlins tonight. This end. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 14, pre-planning consultation, letter and plan attached.
is a fairly straightforward one. On it's a mast that's already existing. It's just some minor amendments to it to improve the service it offers.
Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, move it's noted. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Dankirk.
I propose that we support it, Mr. Mayor, if that's okay.
Propose that we support it. Seconded. Councillor Caxton.
Yeah, just second the second as supported motion.
Okay, all in favour, please show. Thank you. Agenda item number 15, recommendations from the Jolly Fisherman Working Group, which is attached to consider and adopt to otherwise recommendation from the Jolly Fisherman Working Group.
Mayor, these are the outcomes from that group. We have got members and the chairman of the group here. If there are any questions about them, but these are the substantive recommendations that are coming forward for council to adopt.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Tony Ty.
Yes, we sat and discussed this fully, and this is what we've come up with. We tried to keep it fairly simple, so we're not sending out invoices and so on and getting involved in VAT. So I'd like to move it that we take it on board. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor
Yeah,
Brooks. Yeah, Jimmy Brooks. Thank you. Councillor Claxton, is it a question or are you going to the vote? No, we'll go to the vote. It's been proposed and seconded. All in favour, please show. Thank you. Agenda item number 16, Town Clerk's report, which is attached. To consider the report and adopt the actions.
So, Mayor, I think if we go through them, the first item on the report is regarding the annual council. The recommendations that are coming out from the National Association of Local Councils is that we try to complete any significant business before the 7th of May. Now, for us, that is not only obviously the election of a new mayor, but it's also business that goes usually with the annual council and the special council that we hold, which is essentially an extension of the annual council meeting. So the proposal here is that we bring forward the annual meeting to the council meeting that was already planned for the 6th of May. So hold that at 7 p.m. on Wednesday the 6th. And that as there will be no mayor reception following this, that we carry on and complete what would be the full agenda for an annual council. So that will include all the committee allocations, all of the standing orders, financial regulations, and we will also be trying to get the final accounts for this meeting, because otherwise there may not be an opportunity to do so before we're required to submit. Now, it may be that government amend the legislation to enable virtual meetings continue beyond the 7th of May, because that's the issue at hand here. Now, NALC have been pushing the government to respond, and although there was a general indication from the Secretary of State that he was minded to do so, there hasn't been any firm proposals as yet, and the legislation has not been laid down. If it doesn't happen, then it's likely that the next meeting of council after that would be the first meeting in July, because up until that time, it's going to be very difficult to safely meet within the government regulations controlling numbers, because another part of the existing legislation is that we can't refuse members of the public to come in to the meeting. So if we have a face-to-face meeting, we would be stuck in a position where we couldn't safely manage the numbers, and also comply with a safe COVID environment. So this recommendation here for annual council is, sorry, I've got my throat at the moment, I'm struggling, is that we hold the annual meeting on the 6th of May at 7 p.m. Moving on to the annual town meeting, we already had a date in the diary for the 28th of April, and I'm recommending here that we go ahead with that virtually using Zoom, and that there is a presentation on the annual council report. Now, for those, we didn't do this meeting last year, so for those newer members who haven't been here when there has been an annual town meeting, this is not a council meeting, it is a meeting of residents. So that means that we would have to invite residents to join the meeting via Zoom. They'd have to be residents who are on the electoral roll, because that is effectively the definition of a residence for the purpose of the meeting. And we would want to get all of the necessary contact details beforehand, so that we can ensure that anybody joining that meeting is a bona fide resident. So that's the plan. We would also plan to have various community groups and others do short presentations in the style that we normally do at these meetings. And if it's approved tonight, then that we will be getting on with the business of inviting those groups and trying to get a full programme for the evening. Moving on to number 3 in the report, the reopening plan following the Prime Minister's roadmap. Stage 1 for us is to reopen the play parks. We're planning to do that from Monday the 29th of March. Currently we're going through cleaning and carrying out some minor repairs and works to make sure that they're in a fit state to open. Then stage 2 would be to open the council offices and the reception from Monday the 12th of April, and that would be Monday to Friday, 9:30 a.m. until 4 p.m. Stage 3 would be to reopen the community hall for bookings, and that would be from Monday the 17th of May, but we would have to be mindful of any restrictions that apply. The idea regarding the cafe is to open it fully from the 17th of May, but on the weekend of the 15th and 16th, to start being outside serving to seats outside the building, depending on the weather at that weekend, because that will allow the staff who have been off on furlough for some while now to get back into the process of serving and familiarise themselves with all of the etc. So that will be leading up to the stage 4, which is when hopefully all of the restrictions are dropped and we would be back open from normal on Monday, 1st of June, albeit office staff will return to work in the office once they've had the offer of a vaccination. So clearly, if staff want to come in, they can. But if they haven't had a vaccination, they can continue to work until times as they do, and then after that, there are risk assessments to be done for each stage and for each area of business, and the initial ones for those are being done now. We're not foreseeing any major problems moving forward with that. Number 4 was, and I've referred to it in the last report, which was about the insurance. That's now been updated, and I can confirm the premium is in the allocated budget that we have. There was a meeting with officers from Lincolnshire Highways regarding the A158 and the request following a motion to reduce the speed on that road. The county officers explained that the current policy that applies across the whole of Lincolnshire means that currently the criteria for reducing the speed on that road is not being met. The councillors that were there provided some further evidence and information, and they have agreed to go back and look at that and then come back to us again within a couple of months from the meeting. So that was I'm guessing nearly a week ago now. So hopefully we should hear something soon. But I think a clear point from that was there is one policy that applies to the whole of Lincolnshire, regardless of actually the type of situation that is occurring. So the same rules apply whether it's a village with a main road through the middle, or as we've got here, lots of people coming to the coast along a very busy road with caravan parks either side. So the officers were challenged on whether the policy is appropriate across the whole of Lincolnshire, and whether or not it would be better to have targeted policies, but I don't think that's going to occur. Section 6 refers to the Illuminations Working Group. Our existing contract came to an end last Christmas. We'll be looking to have a new contract moving forward. And this is really to create a group so that members have an opportunity to influence and guide what sort of illuminations they want, obviously within the available bit. So I'm recommending a maximum of 5 councillors be appointed to the group. I think if it gets any bigger than that, it becomes very difficult to actually have a meaningful conversation about them. The tender process will take place under delegated authority, but obviously with that input from the group, and then the final decision will be brought back to council for approval. But we're looking to try and get this sorted out before the end of the summer, because it is important to have the contractor selected in order to book the time when the illuminations are are put up. Otherwise, get left to the back end of the queue, it can mean that they only go up just before Christmas, or there's not any control over the timing. Moving on to section 7, the HR committee. Following Councillor Carpenter's death, there is now a vacancy on the HR committee. Councillor Carpenter had quite a lot of experience and expertise, having worked in quite a regulated HR environment, and his knowledge and experience were, very welcome within that committee. And so, council appointing to that committee tonight, I would advise trying to find someone who has that similar sort of experience, if possible. If it isn't available, then I think council should be looking for members of the committee to undertake training on HR, because it is, although it doesn't meet very often, when it does meet, it is important that that it's done, in a way which complies with all regulations. Then finally, district councillor grant requests. Two further, or say further, one was a repeated submission. 2 grant requests were submitted before the February deadline. One was a resubmission of the festive lighting Tower Gardens that came to council previously, and the other one is for a defibrillator for the Tower Gardens Pavilion, support of the community hall. And so that's the report. There are several recommendations there. So approving the plans for annual council and the annual town meeting set out in sections 1, 2, 3. That to appoint up to 5 people on the illuminations working group in accordance with the terms of reference set out, and that an additional member be appointed to the HR committee, again with that taking on board the comments regarding those with experience or that experience by training. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. I was having to read that on my phone. I did have the paper copy was just missing for that, so sorry about that. Councillor Jimmy Brooks, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The question is regarding 3.2. The office staff will return to work, providing they have the opportunity for 2 vaccinations. Does that mean they've got to have had the vaccinations? Because if you have one office staff who says they don't want the vaccine, does that mean nobody will be able to go back to the office at all? And also, do we know how many staff have had the vaccination or been offered at all, please? Thank you.
I mean, I'm hoping that all staff will be offered the vaccination before the 21st of June. And I think that is the government's intention, to offer all adults the vaccination in that time period. Without, there are people who may be in a situation where they feel perhaps more vulnerable because of, certain conditions or whatever. But it's being offered. So not that they have, if they choose not to have it, but having been offered, then I would expect them to be back in work. So that's hopefully that answers your question. But I'm expecting. It looks as if most people will have their first dose very shortly, and by the 21st of June or the end of June, hopefully everybody will have had both vaccines.
I'll just quickly come back to that, Mr. Mayor, if possible.
Yes, please do, Councillor Brooks.
Thank you. It says that the opportunity for the 2 vaccinations. So if they refuse the first one, they're never ever going to be offered the second one. That's my concern.
I think it's all I'm saying here is that they've had the opportunity via the national system to have been vaccinated. If, for example, the government fall way behind with the vaccination and it starts falling months behind, we're not expecting that. If it does happen, then it might be that some staff may not have been vaccinated. I'm just putting it in there as a precaution against that. But I'm expecting everybody to be back by the 21st of June. And the likelihood is that it's only if people haven't had it because they haven't been offered it and they've got some reason, or they feel they've got a reason why they wouldn't want to come back into, an area where there's potentially a lot of people. Cafe will be open. There'll be a lot of people in the building, and therefore potentially chance to transmit. If you will.
Thank you.
Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, thank you. It's regarding the meeting with the Lincolnshire County Council. I heard what Clark has said regarding the Lincolnshire County Council officers' report or what they said. I'm a bit dismayed when the officers, as what the town clerk has said about the policy on Lincolnshire County Council, because it's the county councillors like we that decide the policy for the speed limits policy on Lincolnshire County Council. If that policy is not right, then it should be our county councillors, the 2 that we have, okay, to make sure that that is complies with what is needed in Skegness. I'm a bit amiss because I was a county councillor for 6 years and I was chairman of the Planning and Regulation Committee on the Lincolnshire County Council for a number of years, and I actually put the policy in the first place with amendments for councillors to actually determine speed limits by 10%. So I'm just amiss of what the town clerk and members of this town council, the officers have said, unless there's been a huge policy change where it's just delegated to officers. But why have county councillors? It's just a miss. It's got to me in any case regarding that. Regarding the HR committee, if nobody else wants to go on, I have been fully trained because of work on the bodies that I've served on East Lindsey District Council for a number of years, HR committee, Lincolnshire County Council, HR committee, Waterloo Housing, HR committee, and of course, United Lincolnshire Hospitals, HR committee. I will take the role if nobody else wants it to fill that gap. Thank you.
Mayor, do you want me to come back on the point regarding the policy?
Yes, please do, Chair.
I think both local county councillors would support a change in the policy, but it isn't within their gift to actually do anything other than raise it at Lincolnshire County Council. I think the feedback we got was that the policy is there and the members as a whole, the corporate body and the portfolio holder for that area are not minded at this point in time to change it.
Mr. Mayor, can I quickly come back? The clerk is correct, but he's not trying to be political because it is the political administration that are not mindful to change it. Let's be honest, it is a political council and it's the political administration and the executive member for highways, Councillor Davis, who is not willing to change the policy, which is completely wrong in my view. Thank you.
Thank you. I will tell you, I did attend that meeting, Councillor Anderson, and everything we throw at them, I felt we didn't get the answers, and they were asked a question that this policy was not right. There should be some leeway in it, but they kept firing back, but we'll keep challenging it. Councillor Adrian Finlay, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to give Mark a little bit more information on the Lancashire County Council meeting, I also attended, and we grilled them beyond grilling. Both ourselves, the town clerk, deputy town clerk, we're coming at them from every angle to get information. They took everything away with them, knowing full well that no matter what they come back with, unless there's a speed reduction, we will not settle. So just to put your mind at rest, Councillor Anderson, we won't be settling with whatever they come back at unless it's a speed reduction. And we was quite persistent about that. But as regards that town clerk, I know you said a couple of months before they get back to us. Have we set a date for ourselves as a town council when we're going to respond back to them requesting their response? Just for our benefit, we don't want to be sat around for months and months. I mean, from the meeting to within a couple of months is acceptable, I suppose, based on how they perform. But I think we should definitely set a date to say, right, well, enough's enough. We want a response, and if it's not good enough, we'll come back at you again. And yeah, please. And just regarding anything to do with the illuminations, I would like to be a part of it. Because I've been here for a long time. I've seen how good it was and I've seen how bad it is. And I know they've dangled a carrot with a slight, a little bit more. They're going to add a little bit here and there. But, if there's anything we can do to push a little bit more, then the more the merrier for both ourselves and visitors. Thank you.
Thank you,
Councillor. Just to clarify, I was just going to say, just to clarify on the couple of months is what the officers said. So once a couple of months is up from the date of the meeting, we will follow up and chase them up on that.
Thank you, Councillor Dankirk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to comment and note Councillor Jay Brooks's comment with regards to the clerk's recommendations to have a offering for councillors to work from home. Yeah, I understand Councillor Jay Brooks's potential concerns, which is exactly why the clerk is requesting a HR experienced person within the committee, because whenever we're dealing with something at all that's medically and legal as well as ethical, it is incredibly important that we have a HR committee that is 100% fit for purpose. And I think the clerk's recommendations for appropriate training, I think, is essential for all members of that committee. We know all too well as a parish council of neighbouring parishes that got into potentially alleged sticky situations through HR legalities. And it's really important that our HR committee learns from those acts and also has that relevant experience behind. So I'd propose that training is offered to all members. We seek training for all members of our HR committee, because a well-trained HR committee is essential. It can get extremely expensive for our council if mistakes are made, and we just don't want that to happen. I'd happily propose myself to go on that committee, having some HR experience myself, if the council want that. But regardless, I would still like to propose that training is sought, or just a refresher if need be, to ensure that we have the relevant skills. If indeed such an event could occur, we need to be ready and not necessarily have to rely on legal advice at every juncture. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Simon Claxton.
Good evening, everybody. I mean, I was quite critical about the illuminations last year. So if possible, I'd like to nominate myself to go on to this working group. That's all. Thank you.
Councillor Sid Dennis.
Yeah, really, 158 traffic speed limits. It's very, very difficult for officers if they've got a policy that they have to stick to. So I agree with Councillor Anderson. The only way to do it is to go to council members. The problem is it's got more difficult to seem to react and talk to highways than it's ever been. They seem to be very interested. I think you guys did really well to get a meeting, to be fair, because I know how difficult it's been. I know in the past that they don't like to meet face to face at all, because they're stuck with this policy, and that's all they can react to. So I do agree with Councillor Anderson. Just keep going, but it is going to be a soul destroying exercise for all of us. But they have a policy, and until that policy's changed, it's not going to happen. Whether it's political or who wants to do what, it certainly should be more transparent, and it should be more locally involved, as it is in highways departments in planning, because they never visit the sites. So we've only got a paper view of they think it works and the highways think it works, but they're very rarely in planning turn up. But I would totally agree with it. You just have to keep going.
Thank you, Councillor Dennis. I think something that wasn't mentioned as well, which was questioned, is how they were doing the point scoring. 5 points given for Southview. We did question, I don't think they took into account the 3 new campsites that was there in place, and they didn't, I don't think the showground existed as well. So I think they were taking that information back, and they will reply. So we did feed all the information and asked them if they had everything. Councillor Blackburn. No, hand's gone down, sorry. Councillor Danny Brooks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't actually think our illuminations were that bad. A few speakers have said that they were bad. I think our illuminations are fairly good. I think it's East Lindsey illuminations that are pretty bad. So I think they need to be clear that we are actually doing our illuminations, which I think are pretty good for the amount of money that we've got and what we can do. East Lindsey's pretty poor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Claxton.
Sorry, left my.
Okay, anybody else? Councillor Blackburn.
Yeah, I would like to put myself forward for the illuminations committee, because I think I'm the only one left from the original group, and I know how hard it was to get those extras that we got 6 years ago. So I'd like to make sure that we don't lose any that we've got. Obviously, we're nice to get more, but I would like to be part of it.
I'm not sure if I'm still on it myself. I think I was on it with you.
Oh, you might have been. Sorry, Mark. Maybe you
were. I think I was when we first. Then we got more lights on the tree, and they changed the colour of the lights cord and things like that. Yeah. So
I do think, Mr. Mayor, if possible, anyone that is left from the last panel should go on to the new panel, because I think they did a very good job.
Yeah, I do actually remember working with Councillor Blackburn on this.
Yeah.
At the time, I'm not sure if anybody else is in the room that worked on it as well, but I'm quite happy to go back on, stay on it and go on it. We've got Councillor Finlay wanting to, Councillor Blackburn, Councillor Claxton, myself. Anybody else wishing to go on this this group?
Propose the 5 that you've just named, Mr. Mayor.
I've got 4, I think, Councillor Anderson.
Right.
I've got 4. Need one
more.
Go back
to school then. I need to go back to school.
One more. We need one more, and then we can get this moved. Who else would like to be on the illumination group?
Mary, I said in my report a maximum of 5. 4 would be adequate to move it forward.
Okay, thank you. So we've got 4. It's been proposed by Councillor Anderson. Do we have a seconder?
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. All in favour, please show. Yes, thank you. For the HR committee.
Councillor Kirk, I'd like to propose that, because he's put his name forward. I said I will step in if nobody else wanted to come forward. He's come forward, so I'll propose him. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Danny Brooks.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, left my hand up.
Okay. Councillor Pete Barry. You got your microphone off, Councillor Barry.
Sorry about that, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I would like to second that proposal.
Okay, thank you. So it's been proposed and seconded. All in favour, please show.
Mr. Mayor, just if I may, my original proposal also requested that we seek maybe that some sort of training for the entire group to ensure that we are fit for purpose for a modern, you know what I'm saying. Can't get the words out.
Yeah. There is appropriate, Mr. Mayor, there is appropriate training through now for HR. So it's up to the officers to find out when that training is needed. Yeah, you do need the training, to be honest.
For sure.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Coates. It's been proposed and seconded. All in favour, please show.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. Are you? There's a proposal for Dan Kirk to go on HR, but his proposal was for the training
as well.
As well as, or to take that as a proposal.
As well as, is that correct?
Yeah, just to reiterate, I'll happily nominate myself to go on the HR committee, having had some got some HR experience. That's fine. My recommendation with my proposal was for the clerk to seek or identify appropriate training to offer to the HR committee at the same time.
Thank you. Which was seconded by Councillor Barry.
Yep.
Okay. Councillor Dennis.
Yeah. Are we saying that the only way you can be on the HR committee is if you've had the training?
Not that I read.
Well, I'm not happy. I'm not happy with that. I think
no, I didn't read that, Councillor Dennis, and I don't think Councillor Kirk. Would you like to come back? I don't think you meant that.
No, it wasn't a mandatory compulsory requirement for all HR members to have done some sort of training. That's not the proposal, but to be offered and identified and seek that additional training if members feel that we just need to make sure we've done that review.
Yeah, I can't accept that. I think people need to be experienced and they need to have the training before they go on. Because as you said, you saw the pitfalls. I'm an employee and there are mega pitfalls. And I think people should have mandatory training, like before we go on planning and before we go on licensing. I think that members should have it. And the members, I'm not putting myself forward, don't get me wrong, I've got enough HR in my lot. But, I do believe that is absolutely a prudent measure and it will be a good thing, a good experience for councillors.
Okay, thank you. I've got a lot of hands up here, so if you want to come back on this and comment, if you want to leave your hand up, but there's lots of hands up. So we've got Councillor Anderson.
Totally agree with Councillor Dennis. When I did my training for HR, it was ongoing because of employment law moving fast, and there's always new employment law. We've come out of Europe now. The British government has said that they are going to put there is a review of employment law coming on the statute books, and obviously we got staff, as what the town clerk has said. So if new laws come in place, then obviously we need the HR committee to be up to speed with the new laws. So it's ongoing. So if it becomes mandatory, and I totally agree with that, because it could cost us an awful lot of money if we're not, all those people on that committee aren't skilled in doing that. It doesn't stand still. Put it like that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Tony Time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I totally agree that if you're going on HR, you should have the training, and that's for everybody. Let's make sure that we get that committee working, all singing off the same hymn sheet and making it a good committee.
Thank you. Councillor Finlay.
Yeah, I totally get what everybody's saying. For me, I'm a new councillor still, a couple of years into it, still got a lot to learn. I did join the HR in the hope of learning some from obviously the late Jim Carpenter and so on. And I totally agree where you're all coming from. At present, I am on HR. I am unqualified and skilled in a way for it. I was hoping to learn and be a fast learner. So if that means I have to stand down based on what Councillor Dennis has said, then so be it. It is an important role, and there is a lot of responsibility to it. So yeah, maybe it is right. But what I would like to know is from town clerk, deputy town clerk, is exactly how many councillors we've got with HR training, good enough to be on HR, that are willing to be on HR, because that could leave us incredibly short. But that's where I am at the moment. If I feel I'm not qualified enough, then based on what everybody's said, then I need to stand down from it.
I don't think that's what was meant, Councillor Finlay. I think it's as we go forward.
We're not saying that.
Offer training and everybody takes the training.
Yeah.
I don't feel punished by this, because we all have our own indications of how we read things, and I don't think
it's
that's
just the way Councillor Dennis put it, that people that are on HR really need to be trained in HR, and I'm not.
No, I don't think he was pointing at that.
No, not at all.
No.
So
Mayor,
Councillor Finlay, not at all.
Mayor, can I help?
Yes, please do.
Right. The
I've
HR
got
committee,
yellow hands up, and
the HR committee doesn't meet that often. Quite often, when they do meet, some of the things that they're discussing, I'm able to guide, and obviously having a previous experience in that field. Where it would become difficult is if council are undertaking any major exercise that involves HR, or if there's a serious problem involving a senior member of staff. So either myself or one of the people who reports direct to me, because that's where the committee would start to get heavily involved. So I would suggest that there's a period of time. I don't think we've got any that have got full, what I would consider to be full HR training. Some have been on the committee a little bit longer, but there isn't the experience there. So as for Councillor Finlay, I think many of the others are in a similar sort of position. So what I would say is that the training needs to be offered and taken up, but the committee can operate on dealing with the routine things that it might need to deal with in the meantime whilst we're arranging that training. If the council experience a issue where there's likely to be a problem, then the committee may wish to seek external advice if they haven't had that training by that time.
Thank you. We'll come back to Councillor Dan Kirk then to make his proposal, make it clear. And
thank you, Mr. Mayor. The rationale as to why I brought training up in the first place was my acceptance of how important that is. I wanted to ensure that it was as inclusive as possible. So that was the intent. And having listened to the flavour of the debate in the chamber today, as to the importance of this training and everybody's willingness to do it, let's not forget, I'm happy to amend my proposal, if my seconder would also agree, that to state that there is an acceptance that the committee members will do training, and that is a mandatory component to being on that committee, that they are willing and able to participate in training that the clerk identifies as fit for purpose. Councillor Dennis is quite right, and I appreciate him, adding gravitas and weight to the importance of making sure our team is fit for purpose. My intent was to ensure that we are 100% inclusive from all walks of life and all levels of experience. But if that, I'm happy to amend it to include that there is that expectation that committee members will embark and participate in appropriate training, if my seconder would agree. Councillor Barry.
Councillor Barry, please.
Yes, I would agree on that, Councillor Danny Kirk. Yes, I agree with their training's got to be done.
Okay, so you've read the proposal and it's been seconded. So all in favour, please show. Thank you. Councillor's got the microphone on. Somebody else. Councillor Sampson, got your microphone.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to have to leave
Dennis.
I'm going to have to leave the meeting now. Okay.
Okay. Thank you for your attendance.
Everybody, stay safe, and we'll speak soon. Bye now.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.
Okay, moving on to
Mayor, just going back to the item, there is in the recommendations the plans for the annual council meeting, annual town meeting, and the reopening be supported and approved.
Councillor.
Didn't get to that one.
Okay, Councillor Dunkirk.
Thank you. I'll happily propose that we note the report at item A, agree and adopt item B recommendations. We've already dealt with C and D.
Okay, thank you.
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Burnham, well, I think he just picked it on my end. So all in favour, please show. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 17, proposals to go into private session for the next item under the Public Bodies Admission to Meetings Act 1960 due to the confidential nature of business relating to the proposed honours reward. Councillor Danny Brooks.
Yeah, I'll propose that, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we'll have a second there. Councillor Clapston.
Yeah, I'll second that motion.
Okay, all in favour, please show.